have the pleasure to sit down here with Patrick Palmer of Adobe, professional video and audio for Adobe. How's it going, Patrick?
Going well, thank you, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it's our pleasure. We actually use Adobe products at TWiT. We edit all of these shows. The show that this very interview right here is going to be edited using Premiere. So
Fantastic.
We're big fans.
Thanks for using our products.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit. I mean, obviously, the product is kind of the showcase here. You guys have the Creative Cloud suite now, and the updates just kind of come in large numbers, and they touch on so many products. So maybe we can take some time to kind of talk about some of those updates. And let's start with Adobe Premiere. That's, I think, near and dear to our heart.
Sure, with pleasure. There's actually so much to talk about that I'll focus on a couple of things, and then I'll basically refer to blogs.adobe.com. You can get so much more information for your particular area of interest there. But generally speaking, very excited to be here to see, how we fit in with what's new, what's the trend in the industry, and how we can help our customers to actually cope with all the trends out there. And there are some, right? Some are not necessarily new, but for a couple of years we said native workflows, go for it, because you don't need to manage anything, you can immediately get to work. So we've been kind of religious about taking native media in, and our customers loved it. They still do, and we're actually we're keeping up with our investment there, making everything as fast as possible, taking new formats in, so we make that as painless as possible for our customers. But still, 8K, you win. You got us convinced. Maybe there is a need for proxy workflows. So we're showing a whole new proxy workflow with Premiere Pro that's coming with the next major update. And it's very slick in a sense that when you do the ingest, it's basically just applying an ingest and proxy preset to your ingest workflow. You can start working right away.
Start working immediately.
In and out immediately.
That's so fantastic.
Actually, there's no difference there to what you've been doing so far, but once the proxies are generated, you can freely switch back and forth. Not only that might be helpful for really high resolution media or higher frame rate. All of those things come into play right now, right? It's not just more pixels. Sometimes it's better pixels. And sometimes it might be a combination of lots of things. HDR is something that we're invested in, showing new features here as well. So it's so much that you need to deal with. It's kind of nice to know that if you need to be on a lightweight device for parts of your work, you can do that with the proxies. As you can always come back to the original, no big deal, it's one click, but gets better.
Yeah.
This is the part
I'm sure it does.
Oh, it does. This is the part that I like the most. So with Creative Sync, our technology to connect to Creative Cloud storage, you have an opportunity to have the proxies live in the cloud. That gets really sweet when you get to another workstation. Say you've got your high-end thing someplace, and then maybe you want to do some editing with your MacBook Pro when you're with the customer, when you're someplace else, maybe when you're at home. I don't know.
They do a preview of the take, and they say, actually, this is an edit that we really want to do. Instead of saving it for when you get back to your big machine
at
home,
right.
you can just
for
do it
so
immediately.
many things, it doesn't really matter that much that you're with the original media, and sometimes it's really prohibitive with the heavy lifting with some of those new formats.
So explain what you see then in that scenario. The main media in this scenario is back at the big desktop at your office or at your home. You're on location somewhere and you've got the proxy on your display. Lower frame rate, lower quality to just kind of stream it back, or what is the experience like?
That's an interesting point, because we're not streaming, we're syncing that to the other machine.
Got it.
So that's a little bit of be aware and prepare, right?
Sure.
You can't just run with it and say, oh, I have a 90-minute feature and I'm going to show it to someone. That's not how it works. But you're in control over how the proxies look like. So we don't actually predict a specific workflow with this implementation. We have a couple of nice presets that will work for a lot of people, so you don't need to invest a lot in getting started. But if you have specific needs, like say, you want to keep the resolution very high, but add a little compression because for what you do that isn't hurtful,
sure,
go for it. If you want to get as close to uncompressed as possible, just kill some resolution, that actually might look better if you're editing on an HD screen, because the real-time subsampling, downscaling, well, that's quick as it should be, but that means it's not necessarily as good as we can do in the background, which is also gives you a pretty good explanation why we're not just doing it in Premiere Pro. Media Encoder is fully capable of the same functionality, so you might actually not even be working with this on your main machine. You might let Media Encoder do the heavy lifting on another.
Okay, so and yeah, you mentioned 8K file support now for 6K, 8K files.
Might not be your output, but that's the point about the proxy workflow. Sure enough, it is very likely it's going to be part or maybe all of your input that it's higher resolution than your output format, at least for now. All of that is in flux, all of that's changing, but that's the point. It's a workflow that's very much accommodating whatever is the need, not necessarily going for old school, put a mezzanine in because you can't do any better. You can do better, but it's your choice.
And I mean, continuing on the kind of format front, obviously this has been a huge year for VR.
Yes.
And you guys have kind of built in some VR functionality, some really interesting VR functionality into Premiere.
So generally speaking, we want to be at the forefront of enabling our customers to get into the era of experimentation. I personally believe that's pretty much where we're at with VR right now. I'm not talking about games, and I'm not talking about VR
more
as
immersive video, let's say, than VR.
Or even some other kind of video. I'm really actually not that sure that we're talking about something added on top of an existing experience. It could be other things, really. Or probably what you see today is exactly that. People are doing something on the side to a media production that helps people to get into a certain, even mood. If you think of something like The Martian, well, the team that did the shooting, they didn't go to Mars. It's all, what? Oh, I'm sorry for destroying the illusion, but the thing is, you can't even go there if you're shooting the movie.
Right.
Sure as hell, it looks very convincing
Yes.
once you see the movie, but presenting you with the environment that the actor is in as a sidekick is very intriguing because you can go places not even the crew that did the movie could go to.
Sure, sure.
You can think of many of those kind of movies. I can actually think of pretty much every kind of movie where it's interesting to visit those places. Or if you think about travel experiences, going outside of the media business, of the core of it, there's so much that you can do with VR experiences. But the thing is, there's not that much content out there yet. So, and then some people might say, okay, is that the next 3D? Again, I think because it's on the side something else, it's exciting because there also will be other kinds of monetization for that kind of content. So what do? Clearly there's a need to work in editing with those pieces, especially as if you were to put anything out without being properly prepped, with all the things that have been discussed about nausea, about carefully actually creating that environment, editing is a key piece of it. So we're introducing support for equi-rectangular, already stitched footage, and then you actually edit with that, just like with anything else. More importantly, the viewer is fully VR capable. I think that's kind of the key to it. So without even putting goggles on, you can immediately start looking up and down with the angle of view that you'd be presenting. Left and right, of course. So any kind of really angle of view you might be taking. So you have a good preview, and you will immediately be able to see whether there are things that shouldn't be in the image. Speaking of which, in After Effects, of course, it's interesting to see what our ecosystem does. After Effects has always been big about all the things that are in the product and how they connect with tools that are in our third partner ecosystem. And we have really great integration there for VR too. Like Metal actually allows you to drive an actual set of headsets, which is great for an eventual preview experience.
Sure.
Very much needed. You wouldn't want anyone to experience something full on that you just had as a preview, right?
Right.
But things like Mocha also exist where you can do 3D tracking within that environment. Think of text that is placed someplace, and then as you walk around, it freely floats in that sphere, really.
Yep.
Things you can touch or think you can touch.
Yes.
I'm fascinated with it, and we know a lot of our customers are too. So while this is clearly not mass market, it's this getting ready for it, and that's where we want to be putting at the heart of the application support for everyone to be able to start with it.
Yeah, it really makes sense for you to have those claws in early because it just feels like it's a snowball right now, and you got to get in for that support down the line. And then Lumetri has some new features that people are really excited about. I was watching the demo. I was like, this is like magic. It's really cool to see it work.
Yes, indeed. It's very nice to see the demos and even better see the response to it. Arguably, we've been even making a bet that people would be very interested in working more with color and light without becoming the expert on everything there is in that area. Because it's, there's a lot of heavy lifting on the algorithm side, and the usual approach for many years has been, and I'm guilty of it, I've been with a company that did the usual approach, if you will. We've been putting lots of sliders and many different interfaces in front of people. And that's great if you know what each of those things will actually do for you. If you use a combination of those, you get into an interesting maze. You might actually degrade the quality of the picture very quickly. So we took a step back on that, sat down with users and talked about what's actually essentially to bring color and light to your workflow without overwhelming your users and eventually including more people in the process. We've seen that time and time again now. No one's actually really waiting for anything in color grading anymore. The time when you had a locked edit were probably very convenient on a number of levels. Creatively, it was blocking. So the Lumetri workflow is all about that. It enables you to be creative from the get-go. It involves more people because of an interface that's intuitive and is not catering to people who are looking for as many sliders as possible.
Right.
So for some that might be disappointing. The feedback we're getting is for pretty much everyone else.
Yeah.
That's actually what they want. Fast access to something that's high quality, but so intuitive to access and always very good to the quality of the image that you can actually creatively can go crazy. So we have new HSL secondaries exactly designed in that way. We're putting it in front of you, but it's very lightweight in the approach towards the user. And so you can actually go a little deeper. We've now introduced a switch that will reveal a couple more options if you want to, but you get into it so quick and easily that it's not a dangerous tool anymore. And that's the approach taken with everything in that category. Interesting that you should ask about Lumetri for another reason, as that approach has now been kind of, let's say, adopted and moved even to other products.
Yes, I was just about to ask. Audition
would be a prime example.
Perfect example. And I think it's really important. We'll talk about this for sure. You're talking about Essential Sound Panel. I think it's really important, right? Because video content on the internet, like, you know, we're talking about how explosive VR is right now. Even more so than that is just user-generated video right now. And there's and the bar is all over the map. You've got people who are beginners that are using your software. You've got professionals that are making motion pictures, that you're going to the movie theaters and you're watching your product on the big screen. The scale is wide, and so you have these powerful tools. They need to be accessible to all, and these are great features. I love this Essential Sound Panel, and definitely have some questions. Tell us a little bit about that.
So if you take the Lumetri approach and think about what can be done in the audio realm, it's pretty much the same deal. It's tools for experts who know what to dial in, but it's a huge stack of effects. And if you're task-oriented, and you just mentioned user-generated content, that's typically people who don't come from a background of 20 years of engineering, of sound engineering. So it isn't easy to create something that sounds as nice as it looks great. We found that a lot of people are getting into the visual part of it more easily now, partially because of those tools like we have in Lumetri, but the sound part not so much. And then there's that problem. Once that's not on the same level,
that actually makes your video content look worse. When it's bad sound,
doesn't it? If it sounds really good, it adds that little extra. So we looked into ways of making that more approachable too. And the result is, you mentioned it, the Essential Sound Panel. So what is it? You now have, much as Lumetri in Premiere Pro, in addition, a panel that's very much dedicated to be much more intuitive, even very task-oriented. So I'll give you an example. There are a couple of tabs on top. You might be working on a soundtrack. In the past, we would have told you find the remixing effect and then deal with the various options and have a 3 minute 30 second soundtrack and make it fit the 2-minute 45 that is actually the length of your trailer. That worked beautifully, but again, it was a bit of a process finding it. And how about the tools you need for dialogue? It's so much of a process.
Yeah.
So now there are
and
these
understanding
tabs.
what they all actually do, like compression.
And if you
audio
do it every
compression
day,
is
you'll
really
forget.
difficult to explain to someone who has no idea what audio is.
And if it's not your daily task, you forget. So you start looking for that again. So in the Essential Sound Panel, you click on that task for remixing your footage. Remixing your audio according to the length of the footage.
Got it.
It's there. It will always be there. You click on the next tab. Let's say you have dialogue, 20 clips, and I might be simulating that. People get closer to the microphone, get away from it. We're all familiar with the problem of dynamics. And yes, there are fantastic tools to deal with it, but little do I know how to work them properly so it makes for great continuity. So now what we do is, there's just one slider, I kid you not, that says dynamics. And it's very intelligent in the way it actually looks at the content. So we're actually analyzing the clips rather than
and it
making that a
functionality based on the content.
The curve on a 3-band is then immediately appropriate to the levels in your original footage, to the dynamics that already exist. So that will make for a much more fluid experience from shot to shot. So the idea is, yes, the user will for sure, it's intention-based really. The user knows, okay, I need to actually get that to a lower range of dynamics so everything's more present. But you don't need to know how to do that curve. You don't need to know
what
how
is the
much
threshold? What is
Yes.
the ratio? You know, all that kind of stuff.
It's fun to get into it. And speaking of which, I think more people will, because we're making a connection there, which is actually, to my mind, even more clever than what we're doing already with Lumetri. We're showing you what it's dialing in. So if you go to the effects deck, if you're ever interested in taking a look underneath the hood, you'll be able to see what it does. So over time, you'll
break away
get
from that.
educated as you perform the task.
It's like training wheels for learning how to
Totally.
treat your sound.
Then we have a similar thing.
That was one of my
Sorry.
big questions. Was you know, it's like a big macro that's controlling a bunch of different functions, but really you can break that out at that point and say, okay,
Yes.
I'm shedding the training wheels. I'm going to take where I started with this and now go deeper on its own. It could be a good
Or
starting
you will
point.
ask someone else to help you with a specific clip that
Right.
it didn't perform as well as you'd expect. Of course, that will happen. I mean, it's a machine, right? It will do a really good job, but at one point, as it's available to you, you'll ask someone else. Again, I think it's also really an educational experience that's fun, because for the better part of it, you'll just get a fantastic result. But along the way, you'll learn a couple of things about audio workflows too.
That's important.
And as we expect many more people to tap into that, we've added something else, just mentioning it. Media Encoder is now really available across the pipeline. So I already mentioned for the proxy workflows, we brought that to Media Encoder too.
Right.
But if your last step in the pipeline is to do those fixes, and just making everything a little better in Audition, you don't need to come back to Premiere Pro anymore, because we can now send it into the Media Encoder queue directly. So it makes just for a faster process wherever you take a closer look.
Faster workflow all around. Cool. How about After Effects? Character Animator. I love what I see with Character Animator. This isn't an official release of Character Animator. It still seems like you guys are kind of ramping up to that, but pretty cool stuff that you got going on.
Let's talk about both, actually.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's start with Character Animator, because it's so much fun.
Yeah, it is.
And I highly recommend, for those who haven't seen anything yet, what Character Animator is or does. The quick explanation is, it breathes life into animation done in Illustrator or Photoshop. So you kind of prepare your characters, and then you bring it into a Character Animator, and then you can do what we call rigging. So you decide what's happening with facial expression. So you kind of map to what's in that puppet to a real character. A person
with a camera on them.
You make it a person.
Yeah.
Then you put a camera on yourself, or the person you want to breathe life into that character. Microphone too, so we get really proper lip sync with it.
Nice.
It makes it very easy, which is fascinating to see, in a sense that this is not necessarily changing the way people are doing animation in general, where they have been doing it for many years. This is actually bringing animation into parts of the business where it was prohibitive to even have any.
Sure.
And you might actually have seen that this year on a couple of TV shows. All of a sudden they're very nice and funny and funky characters, and they're actually speaking to a topic that pretty much surfaced the hour before that show. How can that be? Animation usually was a bit more complex than that.
Yep.
So we're even taking it to the degree where we've seen some customers doing a live show with it. You could. That's the cool thing about it. We put it out there, and our customers are doing amazing things with it. New with it this year, we noticed that the rigging, couple of things, but the one that I find to be most important, the rigging process, as people generate new characters now pretty much on a daily basis, the rigging was a bit too tedious on text basis. You have a typo, and immediately a lip is no longer a lip because you just had an F instead of a P because you hit the wrong button on the keyboard. Right, we all do it. I do it all the time. So now there is actually a visual interface for that to do the rigging, next to many updates that just add a lot of convenience as we're learning from our customers what makes them work faster in the application.
Nice.
After Effects.
Yes.
As you asked about.
Touch on that.
One of my favorite applications, because I'm always impressed with what our customers can do with something that seems so overwhelming to begin with.
Yes, it really does. I've had many times where I'm like, I'm going to make this work. I can do this. I'm capable. And it's so deep.
If I see our customers' presentation at the booth, I've been with Adobe for a couple of years and in the business for a number of years.
Yeah.
I never stop being impressed
I know.
with how creative you can put to work a tool that you thought had one purpose.
Yep.
But speaking of which, we noticed over the last couple of years that After Effects is catering to so many different purposes, as you can creatively kind of almost remap the interface and what it's doing to the specific task at hand. It wasn't so much about new features anymore. Don't get me wrong. I think we probably have a backlog for 10 years of more features for After Effects, but it turned out that our customers were much more interested, speaking of the 4K, 6K, 8K ways, to look into ways of getting more performance into this environment, because it's actually tough to begin with. There's so much in processing that needs to happen in this environment. So any time you can save, even on the way in, that's time well spent for us in terms of investment. So that's exactly what we're doing. So there have been improvements for the last couple of releases. This time we focused on ingest, because we kind of noticed people have too much caffeine in their system, and we're guilty of making them walk to the shop getting some coffee, because ingest of a large amount of footage
takes time.
It takes a lot of time. So we look very closely at every little detail there is to improve that process. So what used to be minutes is now pretty much seconds. So it's a 10x improvement. That's no small feat in that particular environment. So that's a great performance improvement. Similar improvements, really great performance improvements on the caching, and in particular on the preview within After Effects with synced audio. So across the board, there are lots of details. Won't bore you with them. The important message for us to bring across is there is a lot more speed there. So good for your caffeine levels, but even better, progress bars are not so much in your face
Absolutely,
anymore.
And I think that's a big. I mean, everybody's striving to make the most out of their time, and there's nothing quite like having that creative, being in the creative mind, but being forced to kind of slow down when you want to keep moving. And so this just helps people be better at their jobs, or better.
I think most people would say make technology go out of the way.
Yeah.
That's pretty much a good description for this.
Excellent. I love what you guys are doing. I love the Creative Cloud suite and just kind of the software as a service aspect in general. We kind of have to wrap things up, but one just kind of final question. You guys kind of switched to the software as a service model, I think it's 3 years ago now. And it really seems like, and I don't know if it's Adobe specifically, but it really seems like there's a movement now in this creative software's world towards this. Do you guys think that maybe you had a part in setting a trend here?
I'd probably be the wrong person to ask. You might want to put a customer up here and say whether or not that did set a trend for them. Generally speaking, I think for us, it's been a great ride, because we have so many more people using our products because they're so accessible via Creative Cloud. Also, if you look at the business model for our customers, not for us, I'm really focusing on that because I think that's all that matters really. It's so much easier to add seats. It's so much easier actually to even get started. If you think about the amount of money a smaller group of people getting started with a production shop would have had to put down up front instead of the monthly payment. So I think wherever we look today, and the customers we're talking to who had concerns about that in the very beginning, it's been a great ride for them as much as it's now a very great ride for us. And you're right, we see many more companies adopting that, and of course that's fantastic, because it puts those conversations out of the way where you actually couldn't update your products in between major releases with new features. That, if you look at aside, if you not take a closer look at any of the business implications, serving our customers with features when they need them, that seems to be the major benefit. And to my mind, that's also why so many companies are doing it. It's just a way better way of serving our clients with the velocity in the industry, with new things surfacing. It's almost like you have to do it. By the way, as you said, software as a service, one thing we didn't touch on is that we're not only doing products, we also have fantastic services. And one of the services would be Adobe Stock. And that's now really tightly integrated with Premiere Pro and After Effects, for example. Actually, across the board, you'll find that with other Adobe products as well. But here at NAB, we're specifically talking about the integration that we expanded greatly. So, have filtered search. You can imagine, again, After Effects, pretty good example. You might be looking for a background plate. You might be looking for actual footage. You might be looking for graphics. And all of that is on the 50+ million assets on Adobe Stock. So it's a great mixture of everything, but the filtered search allows you to go very into detail with what you need to go after. You can then get a preview of it, go for as many as you'd like. It will be with your project. Once you're decided on a particular take or shot, it's one click to actually purchase, but even better, you don't need to swap anything, you don't need to manage that process. It will actually immediately switch to the resolution you acquired.
Very nice.
And so it really nicely integrates with the process. We'll even badge if you already have purchased something, in case you forgot that half a year ago you needed something with that nice sunset over the beach. Oh, there it is again. I'm going to use that because I already paid for it.
Right. Yep. And it's already integrated. I think that's a key component for not having to manage it after the fact. It just works. I love it. Excellent stuff. I'm really excited about Adobe's kind of updates regularly. Always some cool stuff to look forward to. Patrick Palmer from Adobe. Really appreciate you coming to the stage and talking to us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's
been a great show.
It's been our pleasure. All right, and all of this handiwork will be edited with Premiere. Maybe not with some of the VR functionality, but you never know. Someday soon, possibly.